Hi, it's Christine Daigle.
I'm Jenna Brown.
J. Kevin Tomlinson.
And I'm JD Barker. Welcome to Writers Inc. So I've got a TV question for you guys. Have any of you watched The Staircase?
No.
Yes. And both the fictional one and the documentary. And my wife has made me listen to like 1,000 podcasts about it. So yes.
All right. Yeah, so this is I'm caught in the middle of all this. So I saw the fictional one. So for people who don't know what this is about, it's a writer. I think his name is Michael Peterson, right?
Yeah, Michael Peterson.
His wife either fell down the stairs in their house or was pushed down the stairs in the house, or he beat her to death at the base of the stairs of the house. There doesn't seem to be a consensus because, only two people know what happened and one of them is dead. But it is a fascinating tale. HBO's got a docuseries that they did, which the actors in it are fantastic. And I told my wife about it, and Netflix recently added an actual documentary on the show, which was being filmed at the time this guy was on trial, which is, kind of cool in itself that he had the foresight to do that. So I'm watching that now with the real people. But it's really, it's an interesting story. It's true, which makes it more fun. Yeah. But it's just full of, as many twists as any, fictional story.
You left off attacked by owl.
Attacked by owl.
Potential.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
To me, that's the most plausible out of all the things that they threw out there.
I actually thought it was too.
Attacked by an owl?
Because it fits all the wounds and everything about it. But so in the docuseries that they do on HBO, that comes out fairly early. In the documentary that they did, I think we're episode 9 or 10 or something now, and they haven't brought up the owls yet. So I'm waiting for that to be sprung because my wife doesn't know it's coming, and I feel like I have insider information.
Have you gotten to the blow pole thing yet? Have you gotten that far yet?
The blow poke, yeah, we know all about the blow poke.
Okay,
I don't see how this guy got convicted. Based on what what I've seen in both of these shows, it feels outrageous to me that
it was I think it's called an Alford claim. I may have this terminology wrong, but an Alford plea, I think is what it's called. But essentially, it was him agreeing to say, I will say that I am that I will accept the sentence without saying I'm guilty, and it's in exchange for time served. And so the prosecution offers that deal basically when they don't actually have a case. So I would never have taken it, but it's easy to say that when you haven't been through years of them intruding on your life, putting you in jail, investigating. But
yeah, and if you see no other way out, right?
One thing I've learned with true crime cases, at least sometimes, is you'll watch a documentary and you'll be like, how did they reach that conclusion? That's crazy. And then you go in all the details, if you like going down the rabbit holes, and you realize there was a lot of creative editing that went into telling that story, and then you're like, oh, they didn't include a lot of really key pieces of information that would have made you realize, oh, maybe this guy is guilty, or girl, or whoever it is. So I don't know. Yeah. I like watching them, but I always watch them kind of with that question in the back of my head. I wonder what they're not including in this carefully constructed narrative.
They were pretty thorough with this.
And I always go into it from the attorney perspective because I know too many attorneys. I'm married to one of them. And that if you take a plea deal, right, then it doesn't have to go to trial. They're way easier on you. So I can't fault some people for caving to that. It's you'll get time served and that's it. And then you're done, or maybe you get another 3 months. But then you have a badass prosecutor lingering over saying, if I take you to trial, you might be getting life. And you're like, okay, thanks. I'll just take what you said and no trial.
Right.
That's good. So I get why people take that pressure sometimes and don't go to trial. Because if you're, in there in court and you're paying that money, they make it painful. That's their job, right? So
I need to read the book.
We probably should have mentioned there's spoilers.
Spoilers, too late.
if you're still listening and haven't watched The Staircase, you may want to tune out a little bit.
No, I don't want to because I like owls. Right? No, if it ruins my love of owls, I'm not watching that. It's not happening.
Yeah, no, the original documentary was actually back on HBO in the 90s. Huh. It was that old.
Oh, okay.
Or maybe it was 2000s or something. But the there were new developments that brought it back, and they filmed additional episodes and added it all together and put that on Netflix.
Yeah.
And then the Colin Firth movie, is Colin Firth? The Mr. Darcy movie.
Mr. Darcy. Yeah, Colin Firth.
He's dead on as far as acting. Like
he's on.
He's got the voice perfect and everything. But
I need to read Peterson's book though, Behind the Staircase. He's written his own version.
I didn't know this was there.
Yeah, so I'm waiting for that movie.
Now JD's going to disappear for 2 days until he finishes reading that book. We'll see you later.
Yeah, this is the mystery of our time, by the way.
The part that really got me through this whole thing. So the blow poke, which for people who don't know what this is, and like I had no clue. Like I've got 2 fireplaces in my house, and I didn't have a blow poke, but it's like a metal rod that you can blow in one end, to basically start the kindling in a fire to get going. And some of them have a poker on the end, to kind of stoke the fire if you want to do that. That was the prosecution's murder weapon because they knew that Peterson had one in the house. They couldn't find it after the murder, which apparently came out of one of the relatives that brought up. I gave this to them a while back and it's not there anymore. So the prosecution ran with this. They basically brought in a similar blow poke because they didn't have the real one, and they paraded that around for the entire case. This is the murder weapon. This is what was used, or something just like it. And then eventually the real one turns up, and it turns out that it wasn't even the murder weapon. It couldn't possibly be.
Wasn't even in the house at the time.
Wow.
But the part that got me is like, I don't understand why the prosecution was allowed to do that. To introduce this one random item and say this is the murder weapon, and drive that point home when it really wasn't, and they had no proof that it actually was.
Weird.
So all this makes terrible fiction, by the way.
Yeah. If you tried to write this, it would never work. You would get you'd be a 2-star book. Nobody would like it. Not plausible. They would tear it to shreds.
There's always like that. You look at something and you're like, "There's no way that this would ever you couldn't write this. You couldn't." Everyone would be like, "That would never happen."
Yeah. That's what when I reviewed the thing on like Amazon and elsewhere, that's what I say. Couldn't have happened. It did not happen. I deny it. All right. Okay.
All right. And Joanna Penn has her new book out, right, on Kickstarter.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to mention that because I interviewed her. She's going to be on the most recent, as of the airing of this episode, Wordslinger will already have aired. But she's got a Kickstarter for her book, Spear of Destiny. Every thriller writer is required by law to write a book about the Spear of Destiny. This one's hers. And that just kicked off about 2 days ago. She's been talking about it forever, but the Kickstarter is official now. And I just wanted to give that a shout out for Joanne. So
nice.
There you go.
So full confession, I actually did write a book that includes the Spear of Destiny.
Everyone,
It was the second book I ever wrote. It only lives on my Mac in a folder that nobody knows about. So hopefully it will never get out there. But yeah, it's one of those things.
I started one, but I didn't finish it because it was similar deal. But I have a better idea now.
Cool. All right. Well, good luck, Joanna. Hope the Kickstarter goes well. Definitely going to have to check it out. What is in the news?
Amazon Audible audiobook antitrust. Higgins Berman's legal team is investigating Amazon for allegedly harming audiobook authors and narrators through monopolistic practices in the audiobook market. Amazon's Audible may be using exclusivity deals, policies, and pricing strategies that prevent audiobook authors from receiving fair payment. Audible's dominance in the market forces many rights holders to distribute exclusively through Amazon. Audible charges high distribution fees, 60 to 75%, which are considered indicative of monopolistic behavior. Non-exclusive authors face a punitive 15% penalty, further pushing them towards exclusivity deals. Authors like Cory Doctorow have shared negative experiences, citing practices such as exclusivity on initial series books, refusal to record entire series, and low pay for narrators.
Yeah.
I mean, this has been going on since the beginning, right? Like I'm on both sides of this because, I still remember Amazon when it was just a startup little website that nobody went to, and watched it grow. And they grew that business and turned it into, if it's a monopoly today, they turned it into one, but they grew it into that. I feel they should be allowed to reap the benefits of that. But at the same time, being an author, I don't want to be on the flip side and getting squeezed. Just to put this in perspective, we were talking about TikTok shops earlier today. So I like on my list of things to do, one of them was finalize my TikTok shop, because I had set it up months ago, but they didn't allow pre-orders for books. So like you can't put a pre-order up there. You have to wait for the book to go live. So I've had everything kind of set in there, and I haven't turned it on. But I went today to finish it and set up pricing, and I had the hardcover book for my latest title out there at $29 on TikTok. And I was about to hit the go button on that. And then I figured, well, I better just check Amazon and see where they've got it at. Amazon's got it for $19. So like that's where Amazon is for a hardcover that came out 2 weeks ago. Yeah. So if you walk into, let's say, a mom and pop bookstore, they've got to match that Amazon price. If they're listing it at the cover price, which is $29 to $32, depending on where you are, they're getting killed. So Amazon is able to do that because they're as large as they are, and they're doing it here, on the audiobooks, and they're probably doing it on 99% of the other products out there that they represent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They definitely do that sort of thing with ebooks because, they control pricing in that market. Like if I don't price my book precisely between $2.99 and $9.99, I get penalized on the percentages I can earn. Whereas, if I'm Random House or Hachette, I can price it, I could price an ebook at $15, $25 if I want to. And they've got the clout to not suffer. So I don't know if you can call that monopolistic. It seems to me that there are strict legal definitions of what it means to be monopolistic, and that doesn't fit yet. But that doesn't mean this couldn't be a landmark sort of, move towards changing that and changing the language of that.
Yeah. Well, it's one of these, what are they doing? It's like a class action suit. So if you want to get on it, you can go to the link and get into it. But you know how they go. Once it's through, you'll get $2 or something. So
10 years from now, I get $1.20.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The thing is, you've got emerging players in the market. You've got Findaway Voices out there. You've got Spotify. You've got all these upstarts that are offering audiobooks. And the more those that show up at the table, the less likely Amazon could ever be considered a monopoly. Like they're only a monopoly if they're the only game in town. Yeah. So
so it's almost too bad that like Doctorow and others don't. If they're going to throw money at this, why not find a way to promote someone else as a major competitor of Amazon, rather than. Like I just don't. This whole we're a very litigious world, and going after them in a court of law almost never works out for anybody. There's a lot of money that gets thrown around, and then nothing changes. I'd rather see all that.
Lawyers get rich.
Lawyers get if you're a lawyer, you're in the right business with this stuff, but they're the only ones who profit off of it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, next up,
Microsoft's AI deal with UAE sparks concerns. Microsoft's $1.5 billion investment in G42, a UAE-backed AI firm, has raised national security concerns among U.S. lawmakers, particularly regarding the potential transfer of sophisticated AI components. There are currently no restrictions on exporting AI models. New legislation is being proposed to give U.S. officials more control. That's what we want, more control from the U.S. government over AI technology exports to prevent misuse and espionage. The deal requires approval from the U.S. Department of Commerce. While Microsoft claims to have measures to protect its technology from misuse, the specifics are not publicly detailed, leading to skepticism from some lawmakers about the adequacy of these safeguards.
I love the idea of safeguards.
Surely Microsoft would not do something that would harm us. I just couldn't believe that about
not
it.
at all.
Yeah.
I don't know that they can keep, because this is code, right? You copy the code and then you make your own changes to it. So Microsoft can probably place some type of limitation on it, but it's just as easily to get around that sort of thing. Who knows? We can't take our ball and go home. These companies are internationally based. They're not, just because they're headquartered here in the U.S. doesn't mean they don't have an operation outside the U.S. They should be allowed to operate out there. But the same thing's happening with China and every place else. Like they don't want this technology to get out. And I can guarantee if you're in China, you're in the Middle East right now, in one of these other countries that are developing this type of technology, they're looking at the U.S. They're the bad guys. You can't send this to the U.S. So same conversations are taking place all over the world.
It's just interesting that they're trying to legislate it and keep an eyeball on that as it goes along.
Yeah, talk about foxes and hen houses, though, because everyone involved in this has a stake in in every bit of it, and none of them have our best interests at heart, no matter what they say. That's me being cynical. I know, but who would ever think the government would do anything against our best interests? So cynical. All right. Sights and Insights from 2024 U.S. Book Show. So we've got a little summary here. We'll run down it real quick. Some interesting topics covered at the show. AI's impact on publishing, including concerns over rights infringement despite AI's value as a tool. Broader implications of AI, including potential misuse of image and likeness rights. Ulysses Press CEO Keith Reigers emphasized the importance of setting an AI roadmap and adapting to AI's growing role in publishing to stay competitive. Second up, Financial Insights. Macmillan CFO Claire O'Rourke explained profit and loss statements, highlighting the opaque nature of financial practices in publishing. Third up, audiobooks on Spotify. Owen Smith from Spotify discussed how integrating audiobooks from the platform has expanded the audience, reaching 650 million users globally. And finally, Personal Touch in Publishing. Simon & Schuster senior editor Yadon Israel it stressed the importance of maintaining personal connections in the industry, advocating for phone calls over email threads to enhance relationships. I hate when that last one
phone call
rankles me. Like what? I remember working for an ad agency where there was this insistence from the higher ups that we couldn't communicate via email about things. We had to get up from our desk, go up 3 floors to the desk of the person we needed to communicate with, and communicate with them face to face, and or face stiff penalties. That sort of thing irks me.
That sounds like it would eat a lot of time.
People have preferred communication styles, right? I mean, like some people might prefer a phone call, but some people are fine with email or text. In fact, that's what they prefer.
Some people are sociopaths and other people.
Yeah. Well, I saw his argument was that these emails that are, between editors and agents go back and forth for weeks, where you could probably just wrap it up with a 5-minute phone call. I get it.
Yeah.
And I guess that's true, but I guess, anything mandatory. I'm with Kevin. Anything mandatory irks me.
Yes, I know.
Yes.
Do you all have a preference at this point? Like phone call versus text versus Zoom versus...
Well, I hate talking on the phone, but that's just because I'm introverted. I don't want to talk to anyone ever. So
text me.
It depends on what it is. Like sometimes it's more irritating to try to communicate with someone versus text. So it's just easier to get on the phone and just communicate clearly. But for the most part, I prefer to at least start over email or text, and then the conversation kind of dictates where it needs to go from there.
The progression for me is text me. If it's too long for text, if it's something that needs more detail, email me. And phone calls are the absolute last resort. And I mean, that's after smoke signals, carrier pigeons.
I'm just going to start calling you Kevin.
Telepathy.
Just daily, just for fun.
Don't call me.
I do too.
What kind of psychopath uses phones?
I guess that's what I was getting at. Now when my phone rings, I look at it holy crap, what the hell's going on? And something's got to be really bad or blowing up for somebody to actually pick up the phone. If my wife calls me, my heart is boop, 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 thumping, she's in a car accident. This has happened. That's happened. Text is no big deal, but it's funny how those things change too. I had a conversation earlier today with my film agent who's old school Hollywood. He likes the phone call. But we were arranging a call with a studio that for later today. And, when I'm on a call with multiple people, in this case, there's going to be 5 people. I don't really want to do a phone call. I'd prefer to do Zoom because then you can see everybody, it's easier. You don't trip over each other quite as much. But if you go back a couple of years ago, I would have been all over the phone call too, but so it's weird how these things evolve.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's 2 things I don't believe in life. One of them is meetings, and the other one is phone calls.
I'm going to call you later on about a meeting, Kevin.
Yeah, every week about meetings. I'm going to schedule a meeting with you via phone call now.
And I've read some of your books. You've got meetings in your books. It happens.
I do.
And there's phone calls.
I do. There are phone calls and meetings. Yeah, there's all of it's there. Yeah, it's true. That's me presenting those like worst case scenarios. That's what
being
I'm writing
mean
about.
to your characters. I see.
Do as I say, not as I do. That's wisdom from my father.
All right. What else you got in the news?
I did think it was kind of interesting. Beventi helps with signing events. So there's a service called Beventi that helps authors with pre-orders for signing events. Beventi can help you import your catalog, create pre-order forms, share your form with event attendees, and take payments with a few clicks. Sounds like a sponsor. We should get them as a sponsor. This also maintains a list of such events in case you're interested in meeting favorite authors or learning about new ones. So that list is the thing that interests me the most because it's events that I might want to participate in as an author. So this gives me a jump off point for finding things I might want to try to attend. Yeah. So it's interesting.
Cool. Okay. I guess that's it. It's out there if you want to check it out.
All right. Also, I want to throw in there, by the way, and we have discussed it, but you guys didn't do much to lament that I was gone last week. So I listened.
Think we at least mentioned it, didn't
and I'm
we?
like, I got like a half second, like Kevin's traveling. All right. What's in the news? Replacement of Kevin. So
we had cake.
You did okay, and Jenna, you did great. By the way, that's what I really wanted to say was you can take this over now. The news is all yours.
Let's schedule a meeting. I'll call you about that.
Oh, my weakness has been revealed.
All right.
When you're writing a book, the first draft is the easy part. It's what comes after that hurts. The confusion, the self-doubt, questioning this, questioning that. Trying to get feedback so you can feel confident making changes. It's a lot to handle, and that's why I'm delighted to say that this episode of the Writers Inc. podcast is sponsored by AutoCrit. One of the most value-packed memberships for any author, AutoCrit brings you an amazing suite of tools that can make it a breeze to plan, write, and edit your books all in one place. From start to finish, everything you need to produce a strong, confident story is at your fingertips. Get instant developmental feedback on plot, conflict, characters, themes, and more through the Story Analyzer. And edit each sentence to perfection with a complete interactive editing suite packed with reports and insights. And that's not to mention additional benefits like private community forums and live members-only support and writing sessions every single week. It's an incredible place to be for any writer. And listeners of the Writers Inc. podcast can take advantage of lifetime AutoCrit Pro membership for one single payment. That's right, no renewal fees. Head to autocrit.com/JD to get yourself a lifetime membership now. Big thanks to AutoCrit for sponsoring the show.
And with that, JD, who is up this week?
This week we've got Ellery Lloyd, a husband and wife writing team. Their latest novel is called The Final Act of Juliet Willoughby. They're going to explain their process and how they managed to crank out novel after novel working as a team. So here they are, the couple behind Ellery Lloyd.
So I just kind of want to start at the beginning just because it's so unique to have people who write together on, especially husband and wife. How did you each get started writing? How did you get your start doing this?
Okay, good. Yeah, good question. So we were writing, we've been married 10 years?
No, longer.
No.
A bit longer than that. We got married in 2011. So I can't do the maths on that. 13 years.
Yeah. So I'd written 2 novels before that. I'd written kind of comic novels under my own name, Paul Vlitos. And you had written...
I was a journalist. And my background was working in magazines and newspapers. And I'd written 2 sort of travel guidebooks. I lived in Dubai, which is a location that actually features in our new book. But I lacked a Juliet Willoughby. But I had never sat down to write any. No, that's a lie. I had sat down to write fiction. I had just got almost straight back up again. So yes, it wasn't until we started to write together that I really felt the sort of impetus to write fiction.
And you always had really good plots, which was quite annoying because like you'd always come up with these brilliant plots, and because you'd worked in Dubai and you always had amazing settings and things. So the books were just there waiting to be written,
and we'd never write them. So it wasn't until we had our daughter, I'd been made redundant from my job, and when she when she was born, we found we had no social life because she was a terrible sleeper. And so we started to talk about the plot for a novel, which became our first novel, People Like Her. So, yeah, one night we just, we came up with the premise for the first few pages, and we both just sat down and started writing, and it grew out of there.
And we took a voice, didn't we? And then it sort of...
Yeah, so all of our novels have been written in multiple voices. So we tend to, well, we always take one or two of those voices each. So we hope that actually it benefits the book because it really differentiates the voices.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I actually quite like that. So let me talk about this plot. Was that originally something that you were going to write together, or?
For our debut novel?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, plot is probably a very kind term for what we had going into that book. So we knew who the characters would be. The book is a sort of mystery thriller or suspense, I guess, about an Instamom and her stalker. And it's told in the voices of the Instamom, her long-suffering husband, and someone who has a very nefarious plan.
But we didn't know what that plan was.
But we didn't know what that plan was.
So there was a lot of sort of social stuff, wasn't there? Social comedy and social commentary around kind of influencing and thinking about that. And then there was a sinister voice that was just like pointlessly scheming, certainly in the first draft.
Yeah.
So then we realized actually if you're writing as a pair, you do need to plot together so you know where kind of going. That's a writer's tip.
Yes, but it was nice to kind of really get the voices locked down. And it's a really voicey novel, that one. I mean, I hope they all are, but that's really, really character driven. And so it was nice to get to know the characters, but then we did have to down tools sort of halfway through and really work out sort of how the jigsaw pieces were going to fit together.
Okay. So you originally were like, yes, let's write this together. How did you kind of work out that you would write well together, or was it just kind of an experiment? I think finding a collaborator is a difficult thing to find someone that you can work with. So I'm interested how that came to be.
I think if we'd sat down and really thought about it, it might have been a little bit more daunting. But as I say, it was just sitting down one night and saying, let's just see how this goes. And then, the book got longer and the book got longer. And actually we found, and we still find, that it's plotting especially is really nice to be able to do with someone else. So, really talking out sort of knots in structure and plot is a really nice thing to be able to do. And especially with our debut novel, when we had a little baby, there wasn't much else to talk about apart from nappies and weaning, and so it made a nice change. Actually. Yeah,
absolutely. I think a lot of writers kind of spitball with other writer friends. So you just have that built in, which is fantastic.
Yes.
So now you'd written 2 books before. So when you have your first book together, did you already have an agent, or how did you go about finding an agent for a joint work?
No, we started completely afresh, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. So I looked up some agents who were in the genre that we were writing in, and scoured their websites for what they were looking for. And then, we did what every writer, unless they're very, very lucky, has to do, which is kind of submit 3 chapters and a synopsis. And we were lucky enough to get an offer of representation from our lovely agent, Emma Finn, in the UK, and subsequently Hilary Jacobson in the US. And they've been completely brilliant. And, you know, I mean, Paul definitely would have known this before we submitted, but I didn't realize how much a really good agent can help you shape your novel. And we definitely found that with our first People Like Her. And actually they're still who we send. And this is not the case, I don't think, with all writers, but we always send our novels to our agents first to get their feedback. And we're very lucky because we've got 2 agents who work extremely well together in the UK and the US.
Nice. So you just cold query, email in the query trenches. Is there anything different about that, querying as a writing duo, or just pretty much the same process for you?
Pretty much the same process, I think. It was it was a well,
there's a slight difference, I think, between querying agents in the US and the UK, because in the UK they're much more kind of public facing, and you can see exactly who they are, and they've got a whole bit about the kind of writing they're interested in, so it's much easier to kind of target them, I think, in the UK.
Yes, I think that's true. They're quite hard to find on websites in the US.
Very lucky. And then our UK agency had a deal with the US, so they automatically show things, you know, first off
to agents in the US.
But in terms of kind of targeting those letters, that's much easier in the UK, because someone said, I'm passionate about this kind of story. And you say, well, I've written this kind of story. And you can kind of respond to what they say. And we were very lucky in that sense.
Whereas the US ones are kind of like, good luck if you can find me.
It's much more sort of enigmatic.
Catch me if you can.
That's what I'm looking for right now.
Might change tomorrow. So, earlier you said you write the different voices. So you write different characters, different points of views, and go back and forth. Has that evolved? Is that the same kind of process you did with your debut that you're doing with this book?
Usually with first drafts it is, I think.
We tried it different ways. I think for our second novel, The Club, I think we tried to write in some... Anyway, I can't remember. We
divided the characters up.
We divide the characters up, but actually what tends to happen is, because we go through several drafts before we show anybody, apart from each other, obviously, we will inevitably forget who wrote what. So we both edit everything.
Yeah.
And actually that means that so far we've never had to do major structural edits to our novels once we've already done our own major structural edits.
We haven't imposed
to qualify. Nobody has told us to do them, but we sort of rework our novels because we've got that internal feedback process. So I think we are lucky in that sense, but it also means that our we can't remember who wrote what bit of any particular novel. Paul's smiling because he thinks all the good bits are his, but
and vice versa,
and vice versa. But every single sentence in every novel of ours has had both of our hands on it.
Yeah, that must be nice for your editors. You've already done all the work before you get it into them.
Well, not all the work.
But it's nice to have someone, giving that editorial eye to each other. And do you prefer any part of the process? Either one of you prefer the first drafting versus the editing, or it's all the same?
I like first drafting.
I like editing. We definitely both have strong preferences on that front, but that works quite well. Paul is always happiest, sort of sitting down with a blank page, and my background is magazine editing, so I really like something that exists already that can be sort of shaped and tweaked and worked on. That's my happy place.
Yeah, that sounds like a really good joining of talents. So with your new book, The Final Act of Juliet Willoughby, you do the alternate characters. You also have dual timelines in the book. How did you manage that collaborating?
Multiple drafts,
and we had a whole wall of post-it notes.
Yeah, which got rearranged multiple times. There were various different ways we tried to plait those timelines together, and in the end, for the Final Act of Juliet Willoughby is set over 100 years, and it centres around a surrealist female artist who dies in a mysterious studio fire, and her masterpiece disappears, and we sort of see the effects of that over for her family and some art history students who
they find it
become obsessed with the painting.
So it was intricately woven.
There we go.
It to be very intricate. We sort of leaned into complexity, but then very much that.
Yeah,
happened.
very much that happened. So actually,
but we then also realised that you need to lead the reader through it.
Yes, with a complex plot. There are multiple timelines, but it needed to be very linear.
But I also think that there is something there about plotting, isn't there? Because particularly with a complex plot, it might be brilliant. You think this is really going to pay off 200 pages later. But, you've just got to think of the reader who's moving through it. And, they've got to be engaged in the moment as well, not remembering something
from 200 pages ago. So yes, yes, I gave you an example of my point there. But so as the reader didn't get lost, we did unplait the timelines a couple of times and rearrange them.
Well, also you kind of want to stay with characters long enough to get to know them and kind of care about them. Because it's one of the hard things about books, isn't it? Because I sort of one of my kind of day job is teaching creative writing, and I think one of the things you have to remind people is getting people to care about people who don't exist is quite hard. You actually have to sort of give them something to kind of
hold on to and care for.
Yeah, so that's right. You also teach creative writing. So how does that influence your fiction writing, and how does your fiction writing influence your creative writing? What kind of insights have you gained doing that?
I would never be as rude to any of my students as I'm able to be to Collette.
Very direct. We both are.
And I think that's helpful. I always think actually with writing together, there's you do a first draft, and there's got to be a moment of impatience where you actually go through the draft. You say, this is boring. This is logistics that really mattered about, that to me at the time. This is like where you're just like, okay, putting yourself in the position of a reader. So being able to do that impatient draft and being able to give feedback to someone in a kind of very direct way, like that doesn't really work. Whereas I think kind of teaching creative writing, you're being encouraging,
yeah,
much gentler than you'd be with
your co-author, yeah. But and because my background is editing, we both are. If it's for the good of the book, we'll put up with a bit of harsh editing. I mean, actually, for the Final Act,
we're both handing out advice all the time.
Yeah, it would be a bit churlish if we couldn't take it. Yeah, but actually, the Final Act of Juliet Willoughby required quite a big haircut. So once everything was in place and sort of the edit had been done, and we knew that all the kind of cogs were turning in the right way, it needed to lose about 20,000 words.
Okay.
And actually that's because for the benefit of the reader, we didn't want things slowing it down.
20,000. Yeah.
And actually, again, that process benefited from there being two people. Because one of us went in at the sort of the advanced party and did a first cut, and then I can't remember who it was, but I think it was me, went in behind and sort of trimmed it further. So again, somewhere that two heads are probably beneficial to the process.
That's an interesting problem to have when you need to cut 15 to 20,000 words. What do you cut? Like, what did you look for to cut from the story?
Well, I think one of the interesting things that you find actually with writing is you realize when you've got a full draft, I think, you've written it over a process of weeks and months. So things that happened to you, weeks ago, the reader probably read like 2 days ago. So often there's that bit where you're like, remind them, don't forget, by the way, that sinister stranger. Like, yeah, he was only 3 pages away. You've laboured over this chapter again and again. Like, don't forget the heavy-handed hint I dropped at the end of the last chapter. So a lot of it you can lose by that. And it's sort of like, okay, come on, we've sort of explained this.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think there are many books that losing words is to their detriment. Like I do think just trying to make sure that every single paragraph moves the story on in some way and isn't just, especially if, I can't think of a single writer I know whose books don't go through multiple drafts, but when that is the case, it does mean that there are things that you really love and you really enjoyed writing and you feel really attached to that actually serve no purpose.
Yeah.
Well, it's kill your darlings, except I'm
murdering his darlings. Yeah.
And vice versa.
Yeah. Actually, we write in Google Docs. So when we initially started writing our debut, we just wrote in Word doc and would email it back and forth. But of course, there's a big margin for error there.
Yeah.
Luckily, we never did lose anything. But once we started editing it, that became impossible because we couldn't be in the same thing at the same time. So then we started working in Google Docs. But the downside of that is that we can see what the other one is doing if we're both document at the same time. We never write in the same room, but you can hear, there's often kind of shouting up the stairs going, "Oi, I like that bit, leave that in."
Please
then
don't
I
delete
can
that.
Paul surreptitiously
put it back in. But I think it's quite useful as a writer because also there's that thing when you're a writer where you get kind of stuck and you've got this whole book to write and you're stuck in one little paragraph or one sentence.
And I can see Paul's been tweaking 3 words for 2 hours. I'm like, make the book longer, Vlitos. So, yeah.
That's interesting. So I like that. So you're cutting repetitive things that maybe are filler, even if you think they're a clever bit of writing, just to keep the story moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Collette, you said you were an editor, but also you studied art history too. Is that correct?
I did. I studied it at Cambridge, which is where the 2 students in the novel are studying it. So the locations and the colleges and not the
secret
not
club.
The secret and the secret club. Well, not that specific secret club, but there was a kind of gentleman's club in Cambridge that it's loosely based on. But yeah, so I a lot of that was from memory.
Yeah. And I just think it's interesting. There are a lot of books and visual media, films, TV that center around art heists. Why are readers and visual media consumers obsessed with this, do you think? I mean, it's always intriguing when there's stolen art and things like that.
That is a question for you, definitely.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, everyone in the UK is obsessed with a program called The Antiques Roadshow. Have you come across it?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So I think there's something really appealing in the idea of discovering something of huge value that you had no idea, was important or worth anything. And I guess the sort of art heist thing feeds into that slightly, the kind of...
It's a bit more visual, isn't it? Because, I mean, one of the ideas early on we had was about it being, there was going to be a literary version. Do you remember? I this is when you look at the book,
yes.
I wanted it to be about a hidden Byron manuscript that someone found up a chimney.
You did,
I was very determined this was going to be about some lost Byron poem that, which presumably I would have had to write.
Yes.
And make it good.
Because it's Byron.
It was going to fall out of a chimney and then there was going to be a murder. Like, it's worth, I think, when you've read a book, looking back at the ideas that you had. And I mean, I fought for quite a while for it to be about Byron. But I think, actually a painting makes much more sense. It's kind of visual, the value.
There's history attached to it, the sort of story of the person who painted it. If it's a portrait, the story of the sitter. The fact that something that is, oil and wood and canvas can be worth hundreds of millions.
Yeah. Well, the fact that they've been there and I guess you get the same thing with the manuscript. Maybe we should have done it. But the idea that you can see a bit of someone's actual thumbprint or a hair that was caught on it. So there's all kinds of interesting possibilities there. Yeah. But also you had the strong sense that particularly the female surrealists are still undervalued, and valued more than they certainly were at auction historically. But I think there's we read around it endlessly, and there's some amazing books. There's a guy called Philip Mould who writes about, there's a book called Sleepers that we read of his, which is basically about him trawling auction houses and finding these, masterpieces which are kind of under thick layers of dirt or cracked varnish or, sort of hugely valuable things that his connoisseurship means that he's able to spot and clean up and, bring back to life. I just find that whole thing so fascinating.
Yeah, I think what you said about the Antique Roadshow, and that's spot on, right? And people, it's like winning the lottery, but you're surprised. You're like, that thing is that much money? I think everyone is like obsessed with that idea. Maybe I have this in my house. What is Aunt Jane's vase worth, right? And and the idea, I think, I don't want to give anything away, but you incorporated like hidden meaning into the art, using it to tell a story, using it for revenge. And I think, there's been a lot of hidden meanings in art for probably since the beginning of art. So I think that also gives it another layer to that mystery that I think is really, really a good use of a technique for writing. So that was excellent.
And the feedback we've had, which is really nice and, different from the other two novels that we've written, is people are engaging with it like it's a puzzle. Mm-hmm. That they are kind of trying to fit these puzzle pieces together in their head over the course of the novel. So it's it feels like it's a really active reading experience, which is really nice.
Yeah, and they do all fit.
They do all fit. Yeah.
It's not that thing where you're piecing it together and then at the end it all falls apart. Yeah. Hopefully it does all fit together and you I see, this is how it all.
Yeah. I was wrong very far into it, so good job on you. I was like, oh no, I got it wrong. Yeah, and the Egyptology piece too lends another element of kind of mystery and visual medium. That is a huge amount of information. Did you have to do a lot of research to incorporate that into this book?
Yes. I mean, I was quite interested in Egyptology, so I quite enjoy. It's always quite fun because then you get a load of books. I can read. And you're reading them for a purpose, and it was really interesting.
Yeah, and we live about 20 minutes from the British Museum. So actually, we would take our daughter and go and kind of visit, and we bought quite a lot of our books from there. Actually, it was which was something sort of useful to have close by. But that was, and we went up to Cambridge as well, where there's the Arcananth Museum, which is where some of the book is set. That was, it was You can't see because this is audio, but we keep looking over at our shelf of books that we bought for the
Juliet Willoughby shelf.
The Juliet Willoughby shelf. So our desk is surrounded by books, and we have got shelves of research for each of our different books. There's considerably more for that than there was for our Instamom book. But currently we've got a shelf of time travel and a shelf of the history of London for our next one. So
time travel book. Fun. Excellent. All right. And we're running out of time. So just as we're wrapping up, I'm curious for maybe authors who want to collaborate for the first time, would you have any tips or advice for them on how to go about it?
Yes. The hardest thing and the only time that it ever gets stressed is deciding what kind of book that you want to write. And I think that's really important to decide up front. Right? And I think the reason it works is we always know there's a mystery. We always, we're writing a mystery thing.
So there's usually a murder.
So I think if you're working within a sort of genre, and then you can play around as much as you like with the rules of that genre, but kind of, I think where it wouldn't work is if one of you sets off and you want to write a romance and the other one wants to write
literary fiction and
or horror.
Yes,
it's not. It's when it's bought. Once you're actually into it and writing it, then you're off and away, aren't you? If you kind of
and I think
if you've set some rules about where you're going and what kind of book you're trying to write.
What we have tended to do is write a fairly solid chapter plan. So, as I said, we'll start going off on kind of character-based writing for sort of a few thousand words, but then we will sit down and decide, right, this book's going to be 40 chapters long. Things need to happen in all of these 40 chapters. So where does each start and where does each end? And that gives you a really good roadmap. And it can change and it will change, but you do need to have a roadmap if you're writing together.
So I always think it's interesting when you're talking to collaborators about their process, and they each write different characters and different voice, which I think is really smart. I mean, you get distinct character voices. I thought that was pretty cool.
I could never co-author something with my wife, though. Like, not in a million years. We would be so divorced. Yeah. Like, we'd have to divorce and remarry and divorce again to just deal with it.
I'm not going there.
I will say this, though.
I'm not going to touch that.
And I know she doesn't listen to the show because she doesn't consume any content that I create. But in case she is listening, I will say this. My wife is excellent at coming up with great ideas and plots. Yeah. She hasn't worked up the confidence to sit and actually write it yet. And I have been tempted to try to co-author with her in the past on some of these things, but 5 seconds into discussing the story, I already know, like, this is just going to end with stabbing or something. Like, she's never going to be able to tolerate what I have to say, and she frustrates the crap out of me. So I'm really impressed by this couple. Yeah, that they're able to do what they do.
I think it would be nice to have someone to plot with, though, don't you think? Because usually I have to
I do
beat someone into it, like an author's friend or my husband. I'm like, hey, listen to this plot. I think it's kind of nice to have that back and forth brainstorming.
Yeah.
I've always enjoyed working with co-authors, because otherwise, the idea is 100% yours. It's only going to go in one direction. And if you have that conversation, whether it's a phone call, a meeting, or Zoom or whatever, just picking on Kevin, like you have this co-author who's going to introduce some weird element that would have never crossed your mind. And that gets both of you thinking, about going down a different road. And that, to me, creates a fresher story. So I prefer it. I would love to hear more about how they go back and forth with the dialogue, because I've done that before. So like when I've done it, like I'll write, let's say 100% of the dialogue, but then my co-author will take particular characters and then go back and rewrite those characters to fit those other voices, because like you have to keep the conversation or the text coming. So you have to get to the end of that chapter or whatever, but you can always go back and edit it. So I would have loved to hear just a little bit more about how they do that.
So question for you, JD. So when do you send your novel to your agent for feedback? Do you send it like early in the process, late in the process? Not at all.
That That has evolved so much over the last few years. Initially when I was with Kristen Nelson, I would send her, basically after it left my copy editor. So it goes through 5 or 6 drafts, with just me internally. I send it off to a copy editor to clean it up, and then she would get it. And at that point, I always felt it was a publishable novel. It's been, edited, it's been copy edited, all that kind of stuff. But for a couple of them, like, she completely tore them apart, and I would go back and I would rewrite it to match what she's looking for. And I would spend a lot of time on it. But the truth is, the original book was just as good as what we came up with, through her feedback. It was just different. And it also cost me 3 more months. So I basically stopped doing that. And like, my world has changed so much at this point. Like, my current agent learned about my latest book because she got a list from Simon & Schuster, and she saw it on there. So like, I didn't even tell my agent that this book was available. Like, she saw it there before she saw it, heard about it from me, which is another whole problematic thing. But yeah, so it's completely flipped on its head, I guess. I see an agent as an educated beta reader. Like, I like to get their opinion. I think they've got a good opinion, but at the same time, they're so closely involved with the industry, and they're talking to editors. People are telling them what everybody wants. All that stuff kind of works its way into the conversation, and it's almost like being in a writer or critique group. Like, those people are going to tell you, to change very different things in the book than a flat out reader would, and I prefer to get feedback from a reader, somebody who's just consuming it from that standpoint, and not somebody who's actually working in the industry.
That makes sense. So the other thing that they talked about, which I thought was interesting, was how they worked with multiple timelines. So you've got different characters they're each writing, and now they're doing multiple timelines. And I thought it was kind of neat what they said is, like, when you're doing that jump back and forth, you have to make it linear. You have to think about the story. So I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But I'm like, do people do that differently? Do you ever use a timeline in a way that's not linear for the story? I can't picture even what that would look like in my head. I don't know.
Have you guys written multiple timelines?
In the same book? I have, yeah. But they've always been linear. But now I'm kind of thinking, like, how would I do a non-linear, like, secondary? I could see the secondary timeline, the like B story. I could see maybe doing that non-linear, especially if there's elements in that would reveal the ending for the A story. So, but I'm trying, like, now I'm fascinated by that. We'll have to have a meeting after this call. But
I was like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense now that they said it out loud.
We will have to have a meeting. I mean, I think in some ways, like, a story, for it to make sense, would always sort of have to progress linearly, even if the timeline wasn't linear. Like, V.E. Schwab, I think, did that in her Vicious
she did.
book, where, the timeline is all over the place, but like, the beats of the story progress in a very specific way. So like, you don't exactly know what, that specific timeline is revealing, but it is revealing something. And that's a fun puzzle, but you would have to be very, she's a meticulous outliner. So I can't imagine that you would be able to just pants something like that.
Challenge accepted.
I've only seen 2 scenarios where a nonlinear story worked. There was a book I read, and I'm terrible, I can't remember the name of it, but the B story was a series of letters, and those letters could be put in any order, and they still fed the A story, just as well. And there was a show on Netflix about a year ago that came out, a series, and it's, I think, about 8 episodes, and you can watch those episodes completely out of order. And Netflix actually did that on purpose. Each episode, it wasn't numbered. They were, I think, color coded or something like that. And everybody who watched it randomly selected the order of your episode. So, if Kevin were to watch it, he's going to see them in a different order than I would see it versus the rest of you. But the story still works. And so, it was one of those things. I watched it first as a fan, and I went back and, took some extensive notes to figure out exactly how they did that. And it's, it's definitely a good teaching tool or learning tool.
Yeah, that's cool. I tried to watch that, but my technology was outdated. I was like, I'll have to go from the TV to the computer, but then I just never got around to it.
There was a season of, it may have been Black Mirror, where they did like a choose your own adventure thing. You're not talking about that, right? This is something different.
No, this was about a heist. And it was, the way they basically did it is each episode told a different portion of the timeline. So like all of them, fed the same story. None of them really gave anything away. So you could watch them out of order. You could shuffle them around and it still made sense. But it was just, extremely well done. Like they didn't have to go that extra mile. They could have easily told it as a linear story if they wanted to. It would have been just as good. But the fact that they did do that, it created a lot of hype and a lot of people watched the show just because, hey, you're watching it and it gave you this one first. What did you get first? People talked about it just because of that unique factor.
Yeah. Did they have like a solid first and last episode or was everything scrambled?
As far as I know, every episode was scrambled. It didn't matter what order you watched it in.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay.
I'll see if I can find the name of it. I'll put it in the show notes.
I wish it would come to me, but it's not coming to me. And of course, then there's Pulp Fiction, which is very nonlinear. But if you unfold it, it's very linear. I've pondered that a while.
Well, I guess that's what I mean. Like sometimes it seems like it's not linear, but it is. I don't know. That's an interesting thing to think about and puzzle through.
So is it still, Memento is supposed to be nonlinear, but it's actually just in reverse. So that's still linear to me.
So
yeah,
I'm obsessed with Memento actually. And I've watched I've got a whole thing with Christopher Nolan where he actually unfolds how he did it. And when he explains it, is actually, he describes it as a horseshoe. And so one timeline is going backwards and one timeline is going forwards, but they actually move together towards the same finale.
Yeah.
So it's non-linear, but it is also actually very linear. Like every reveal happens at a very specific point to unfold like this other storyline, which they then converge. And then it's quite fascinating how he did that. I am quite obsessed with Christopher Nolan and his brain and how his storytelling works because it's just, he tends to play with time in his storytelling in very, very interesting ways that I would love to learn. So if Christopher Nolan is listening to this and needs an intern, like I'm just saying, I would.
All the Nolan Batman movies were actually told in reverse. People don't realize that. Yeah,
they're fantastic. Best Batman movies ever.
They are the best Batman movies. I will say that.
Absolutely, they are. Yeah. And Inception and what was the last one he did?
Robert Pattinson.
That one was really good too.
But I was furiously Googling while you were talking, and Kaleidoscope was the name of the
Kaleidoscope,
the Amazon show.
That's
a great title.
Very fitting. Okay.
All right. And with that, JD, who is up next week?
Next week, we've got Carole Lyons. Carole's debut novel, Someday Everything Will All Make Sense, was a finalist for the Nielsen Prize for her first novel and an American Fiction Award. She's back with a dark comedy called The Vixen Amber Holloway, which releases June 11th. So Carole Lyons.
Sounds great. If you'd like to be notified as soon as new episodes publish, make sure you go to writersincpodcast.com and sign up now. We'll see you next episode and have a great week of writing.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Writers, Inc. Access the show notes and leave a comment at writersincpodcast.com.